The night smelled of smoke and cold iron as the soldier moved through the ruins of the abandoned checkpoint. He had been alone for weeks, separated from his unit by a bad map and worse luck, surviving on ration crumbs and discipline. Drilled into him long before the war, hollowed his voice. Every sound made his hand tighten on the rifle. But it was not an enemy he feared anymore. It was the quiet. Quiet meant time to remember faces, orders, and the things done because someone higher up had said they were necessary. He heard her before he saw her, a weak, steady breathing that didn't belong to the wind. She sat against a broken wall, wrapped in a torn coat that once might have been warm. Dirt streaked her face, but her eyes were clear and painfully calm. When he stepped closer, she didn't scream or run. She only looked up at him and spoke, with a flat certainty that cut deeper than any weapon. "Just kill me fast." The words froze him. He had heard begging before, shouting, threats, prayers. This was different. This was resignation. He lowered the rifle slightly, unsure why, and asked her name. She shook her head. Names, she said, were taken first. What followed after was worse. She explained in broken sentences how her village had been occupied, how symbols were burned and carved into lives to remind people who owned the future. Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. She loosened the edge of her coat, just enough to show him the mark on her skin, a cruel emblem pressed there to erase identity and replace it with fear. It wasn't graphic, but it was unmistakable. The soldier felt something inside him crack. He had seen that symbol before, stamped on walls, on documents, on orders he pretended not to understand. Seeing it on a human being made every excuse rot. He turned away, swallowing hard, the rifle now hanging uselessly at his side. Killing her would be easy. Ending her pain quickly would even feel merciful. But walking away from the mark, from what it meant, felt like another kind of death, one he had already lived too many times. He sat down across from her instead, back against the wall, keeping watch. "I won't," he said quietly. "Not tonight." The words were small, but in the ruins they sounded like defiance. Morning arrived slowly, pale light slipping through the shattered concrete like it was afraid to enter. The soldier had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the mark again, not the shape itself, but what it represented. Orders followed without question. Silence rewarded cruelty renamed as duty. The woman still sat where he had left her, knees drawn close, watching the sky as if it might explain something. She did not thank him for sparing her. Gratitude, he realized, belonged to a world that no longer existed for her. They moved at dawn. Staying meant discovery, and discovery meant the end. He gave her half his remaining water and watched her drink carefully, as if she had learned long ago that even relief could be taken away. She walked with difficulty but without complaint. Each step measured, each breath controlled. The soldier slowed his pace to match hers, scanning the road ahead while listening for pursuit. For the first time in months, he was protecting someone instead of a position on a map. As they traveled, she spoke more, not of pain, but of what had been lost. A brother who carved toys from scrap wood. A mother who sang while grinding grain. A school that closed when the soldiers came and never reopened. She never described the worst moments directly. She didn't have to. The gaps in her story were heavy enough to carry everything she refused to say. The soldier listened, feeling the weight of each silence settle on his shoulders. At an abandoned farmhouse, they stopped to rest. He checked the horizon while she sat in the shade, fingers tracing lines in the dust. She asked him why he wore the uniform if he hated what it stood for. The question wasn't angry, just curious, like someone trying to understand how a fire starts. He didn't have a clean answer. He spoke of debt, of family expectations, of fear disguised as loyalty. Saying it out loud made it sound weaker than he had ever allowed himself to think. When distant engines echoed across the fields, decision replaced hesitation. He tore the insignia from his jacket and buried it beneath the dirt floor. The fabric felt lighter without it. He told her he couldn't undo what had been done, but he could choose what came next. There was a route south, he said, a border that still let people cross at night. She looked at him for a long time, then stood. "Don't stop now," she said. It wasn't hope yet, but it was no longer surrender. The third night, The road had stripped them both down to their essentials. Hunger gnawed quietly, and exhaustion made every sound feel louder than it was. They traveled under the cover of darkness, guided by broken fences, dry riverbeds, and the soldier's fading memory of maps he once trusted without question. Each step away from the uniform he had buried felt heavier and freer at the same time, like learning to walk again after years of standing still. When they reached the border zone, it wasn't marked by flags or walls, only by a long stretch of open land where trust had collapsed, and no one claimed responsibility. The soldier slowed, scanning the horizon for patrol lights. The woman stopped beside him, her breathing steady despite the fear pressing in from all sides. She no longer asked him to end her life. Instead, she asked what would happen if they were caught. He answered honestly. There were no guarantees. War did not offer clean endings. A sudden flare lit the sky in the distance, painting the land in harsh white for a brief second. Instinct pushed him forward, pulling her down into the tall grass. They lay still, listening as voices passed far enough away to leave them untouched. In that moment, he realized how much he wanted her to live, not as an act of redemption for himself, but because her survival felt like resistance against everything the mark was meant to destroy. When silence returned, they moved again. Just before dawn, they crossed an invisible line where the air felt no different. Yet everything had changed. On the other side, a small group of volunteers waited near old trucks, offering water, blankets, and cautious smiles. The soldier stopped at the edge, knowing this was where his part ended. He had no papers, no rank, no future he could name. She turned to him, holding the blanket tightly around her shoulders. "You didn't kill me," she said softly. "You chose something else?" Her voice carried strength now, fragile but real. He nodded, unable to speak, past the tightness in his chest. As she walked toward the others, the sun rose fully, washing the land in light that felt undeserved yet welcome. The soldier remained where he was, watching until she disappeared among people who could help her heal. Then he turned back toward the road, not to return to war, but to face whatever came next without hiding behind orders. For the first time, the silence no longer felt empty. It felt earned.